Good Tuesday evening, everyone. I'm Joe Martucci, and welcome back to another episode of Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, www.njcoastalcoalition.com. We are brought to you live in part by Triax57, who's helping record this and stream this out to you live here tonight. And on our Tuesday evening, I am here. Last week I wasn't here. Now I'm back. Palma's not here, but for good reason, and we'll let her explain when she comes back. But join with me, Dan Skeldon, and our special guest, our first guest on Tidal Flooding Talk Revamped, Chuck LaBarre, the emergency manager for the city of Margate. We'll start with you, Dan. How's it going? We're warming up. That's good. And no coastal flooding this week, so that's even better.
Not much coastal flooding this winter, and I was solo
Yeah.
last week, and didn't really have much to talk about. So we were excited to bring on a guest, and we're really excited to have Chuck here. And we're confident, technologically speaking, now where the guest will be a weekly feature. Eventually, we'll have Palma back here, so all three of us will be on with a guest every week. And yeah, it's been a quiet winter, but I'm sure with two meteorologists and an emergency manager, we can easily fill up 25 minutes of things to discuss, even with the lack of nor'easters and eventful weather over the past few months.
Yeah, I think so. And, I'll tell you what, Dan, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like I'm exhaling after the past like 7 weeks of cold and, at least storm threats around. Not that we got that coastal flooding, but, the snow and the cold. This week just kind of feels like an exhale. Feel the same way?
Yeah, it's been refreshing, 50s and 60s. I mean, we haven't had many breaks from the cold this winter, and it feels good. Even the snow lover in me is ready to just turn the book on this winter and say, all right, welcome spring. Meteorological spring begins on Saturday. Of
Yes.
course, the first day of astronomical spring is March 20th. We all can't let our guard down in March. We've had some pretty meteorological March madness, in March's past, but it does look to be a quiet start to March this weekend.
Yeah, it does, and we'll take it. Just a little bit breezy, looks like Saturday and Sunday. That would be about it. Before we get to Chuck, we do want to tell you that most home insurance policies do not cover flood damage. That's why having flood insurance is crucial. And through the National Flood Insurance Program, communities partner with FEMA to make coverage available, often at discounted rates. Know your risk, explore your options, and make sure you're covered before the next storm hits. All right, let's officially welcome Chuck LaBarre here. Chuck LaBarre, again, the emergency coordinator, management coordinator for the city of Margate in Atlantic County. A friend of both Dan and mine. I haven't seen you in a little bit, Chuck, in person, but it's always good to see you here on the virtual airwaves. So welcome to Tidal Flooding Talk.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Dan, really appreciate you giving the time to your audience and to our area to better educate them for flooding issues. Especially you have a lot of people that decided to move down to the shore and they're not used to it, like the year-round locals and longtime residents. But thanks for having me.
Absolutely, we love having you here. That for sure. Let's start with square one, like real basic. Like, give us what is the elevator pitch on an emergency manager at the town level?
I mean, I'll try and make this as exciting as possible, but I come from a long career in public safety. I'm still with the Beach Patrol in Margate, but was with Atlantic City Beach Patrol and 29 years in Atlantic City Fire Department. So I have a real grassroots feel and
Yeah. Looks like we lost Chuck here. I didn't know if it was just me or everybody else. Dan, did you lose Chuck as well?
I lost Chuck as well.
All right. Chuck, I see Chuck just turned a little red there. It's all right, Chuck. We'll get back to you here. Probably just some Zoom issues, which is always the case. But we started out strong. Looks like Chuck, are you back? Can you hear us? He can hear us, but we can't hear him. Um, we'll continue for a second. We'll see if Chuck can pop back in while we wait for him to come back. But emergency management, I can kind of answer a little bit for him. They are really I would say, the liaison between town services and the public when it comes to natural disasters or during COVID, he was super busy as well. Staying on top of what was happening with the town and COVID and vaccinations and testing sites and all of that. And I think it's one of those things, Dan, where like most people may not even know what an emergency manager is 99% of the time, but when unfortunately when disaster strikes, that's when we start to hear about them.
And South Jersey, you and I have both worked locally on the municipal level, on the county level, perhaps on the state level as well. We're blessed. I mean, I think emergency managers across the country, donate their time to keep us safe. But we're blessed with some really great individuals that had a lot of practice, like you said, from COVID. Every coastal storm, every tidal flooding event, and of course we had the whoppers, with Jonas and Sandy, and we were tested frequently for that decade there, the late 2000s and into the mid 2010s, and it gives them a chance to hone their skills. Not that they're rooting on for storms, but we really do have a stellar, lineup and a stellar bench of emergency managers that know their town, know what their town needs, know how to act, when they are sprung into action.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially at the coast, I mean, it just always adds an extra layer, right? And that's why we have the New Jersey Coastal Coalition to help mitigate against coastal flooding risk and help the emergency managers, promote flood resiliency here. I mean, a lot of we have our monthly meetings for the coalition. A lot of times it's the emergency managers that are the town representatives here because they're taking the information about, what's happening with nuisance flooding or what's happening with grants that the coalition's getting or the web app that we worked on that allows all municipalities for free to access where is the safe place to park my car, where is there a coastal flood warning, what streets can flood depending on the height of the tide, and disseminate that to the public. So it's super it's definitely critical, and and we always appreciate them. And again, like when even before I started, working at the Press of Atlantic City in 2017, I barely knew what an emergency manager was, but I'm really happy I do now, and happy to make so many connections up and down the shore. And I hope to be a good resource for them, and I hope that they find me to be a good resource also.
And we know emergency managers, we see them in action during emergencies, but obviously, thankfully, the time we are in an emergency, the time they are acting and using all their training is very minimal. Ideally, it's years in between emergencies, but obviously, Chuck is busy year round. I mean, because you're constantly planning, you're constantly learning, you're constantly scheming. What can we do better? There are so many different types of emergencies. So even though emergencies happen very seldom, the planning is kind of a 365-day a year endeavor that our local and county emergency managers undertake.
Yep.
About now, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I'm not the tech savvy guys like you are.
No problem.
I was able to catch most of what the both of you were saying. But at the local level, it's just making sure that we are a liaison between the municipal level and the county, and then everything comes out of this New Jersey State Police Office, who is oversees the New Jersey Office of Emergency Management. So it's just making sure that that we're meeting all the disciplines of the Office of Emergency Management, and it's mostly hazard mitigation, preparedness planning, emergency response, coordination, recovery of operations, communication management training and exercises, and public outreach like this.
Let's talk about Margate or pretty much any town along the Jersey Shore. We have so many second homeowners or vacationers who let's face it, we're coming during the summer, right? And not even a whole summer at that. It's on the weekends. The chances of seeing something where maybe, Chuck, you're going to be that voice or that face is probably slim, right? So how do you balance getting out to all those second homeowners with, the actual day-to-day duties that you have to, for the people who are here year round?
Well, social media has been just as far as informing local residents, local visitors, being able to get information out quickly uh, has been a real valuable tool. And it's there's a lot of different resources out there, but Facebook and Instagram is the two that I use, the two that I'm most familiar with. I'm really not on TikTok or X, but those are the two that I've found, especially Facebook, because there's so many different pages, and you can get your message out to people that already belong to anything that says Margate. I think there's like 6 or 7 different pages that I always, whatever messages I try and put out there, I hit. We also have a code red system in Margate. It's like a reverse 911 system. We ask all our residents to sign up for that. Uh, and then just word of mouth. And I think people that are living and moving down to the shore, and then people that live here, are very tuned into the weather. Especially, they know when hurricane season um, begins, and they know what's the peak for us for the most part. And you have these small shore towns, these beach communities, and people talk to each other. I have a lot of neighbors that my neighborhood's probably 50% year round, 50% summer residents. So all my neighbors have my number. And I'm kind of like the captain of the block, so to speak. And we have group texts, I'll give out information. And I know that happens throughout these neighborhoods. So those are the tools we use. And then also, like, um, we put a lot of information in our water and sewer bill in Margate. That came out, I think, last month. And we just, there's different local circulars that are free. I mean, Down Beach Current used to be a big one. And then I think At the Shore was always a publication that we would use. But people are in tune. They have the weather apps, they have the Weather Channel. I'm telling you guys, we're a huge resource. Dan, I don't even know if I ever told him that when Sandy hit, I was committed to stay. I had been through so many hurricanes and nor'easters in my life and worked in them, and I had the confidence that I knew I wanted to be here, and it would really, I wanted to see the threshold of flooding for future forecasts. And I sat in my car. I think it was around, Dan can correct me, but I was listening to Dan on AM radio because I was charging up my phone because the electric went out, and I had it's the first time I had seen water coming across the street covering the entire blacktop. And I had a stone in my driveway that I would put at the water line, and I kept moving it. I knew when high tide was, and I listened to Dan, and then the eye of the storm came over. It calmed out, and then once I saw that the water was backing off, um, I knew we were in good shape. So just having that local knowledge is a big um, piece of the puzzle that we all use.
What's the biggest challenge for an emergency manager? Is it getting that information to everybody? Is it correcting misinformation? Is it trying to predict the unpredictable? What type of disaster, what type of flooding? Joe and I, will both admit, meteorology is not an inexact science. So, a lot of the time you're prepared for what's coming, but occasionally it may be worse, or maybe not as worse as expected. So in the day-to-day life of an emergency manager, what is your biggest challenge?
I think for me, and this answer could vary from
Right.
different local level emergency managers, is, and I'm a big believer, and it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, is not it's when to put out information and when not to, because I truly believe in the boy who cried wolf syndrome. And if you like put out so many notices, like every time there's like a weather event, people start to tune it out, I think, So I really am very choosy on what I think is valuable information. And a big example of that was Irene. And I think we've talked about this before, and I've talked about it with Joe. I think when Irene, I stayed for Irene. I surfed the night before in Atlantic City, and it was eerie because it was the evacuation notices went out, and the mid. I would say, it's the biggest evacuation I had seen on Absecon Island, and people followed. But then it that storm kind of overshot us. The bulk of it hit up North Jersey and New England. I mean, I know Patterson got hit really hard. I think there was really heavy flooding in Patterson, but I know, like, I'm familiar with the Killington, Vermont area, and they had roads washed out, and Killington got hurt really bad. So just choosing when to put information out and warnings and when not to, because people will heed the warning, but if it becomes so often, they're kind of just going to blow you off.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it 1,000 times in one way or another, whether it's here or another show. I mean, I feel like if Irene did not happen, maybe people would take Sandy would take Sandy more seriously, because the day after Irene hit, I mean, there were people making T-shirts on the boardwalk saying "I survived Irene," right? Kind of like a joke. I mean, you didn't see that after Sandy. I mean, you had the whole "Stronger Than the Shore" campaign, but that's a different story. That was something serious. So. Yeah, I mean the cry wolf thing is certainly relevant. Even the National Weather Service. I mean, I think the National Weather Service has recognized that a lot of the advisories that are issued are going to change in the next year or two, where it's just going to be now watches and warnings. So, excuse me, winter storm watch, winter storm warning, or hurricane watch, hurricane warning. There's not going to be a winter weather advisory, or there's not going to be a cold weather advisory, just because, we want to make sure when you see something from the National Weather Service, which then gets disseminated to you, Chuck, right? You want to make sure it's something serious.
Yeah, I always there's always things that I use as an example, and I remember when Sandy was approaching, and when being a surfer and being an avid weather buff, I'm constantly and then I was a battalion chief on the fire department in Atlantic City back then. I was really watching Sandy's forecast way out, like 10 days out. And I used the spaghetti models that the Weather Channel was showing. And I think you guys could tell me, but I think like there was like 90%, maybe 80% of the spaghetti models had it making a, west, right, left-hand turn on almost on a 90-degree angle. And I remember seeing an article later about how the spaghetti models were really spot on that storm. So that was one that I was, I wasn't emergency management back then, but I think you could refer to those models and go, okay, what's the percentage of all these models are taking it inland, and somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, and specifically South Jersey. It was like started as I got closer, started to really become the bullseye. So I think it's just you guys have the formal training. I'm just a guy that has been in emergency management and public safety and is a weather buff, so I can kind of start gelling all my past experiences together to have kind of make an educated guess on how much I'm putting out and what information I'm putting out and how we're going to respond.
I feel like most emergency managers too. I mean, they have some interest in weather. I feel like as well, so that's always a help, right? I mean, you want to have a passion for what you do, but being knowledgeable about it's great as well. Um, I was gonna just to kind of switch gears a little bit, just talk about the coastal flooding perspective from Margate. So Margate, can you tell everybody what your community rating system score is and what kind of discounts those mean for the homeowners in Margate?
Well, as of right now, I couldn't tell you the number right now. You kind of caught me
I
off.
put you on the spot.
Yeah, but outreach is a big part of it, and if you do your due diligence, and Palma is a wonderful resource, and Jimmy Galantino, our code enforcement and construction official, is our floodplain manager. And being a member of the Coastal Coalition, and getting information out helps drop it hits all these points for the rating system, and it helps as a municipality and community. When you hit certain points, or I should say boxes and goals that are set by FEMA and the flood insurance industry, it brings down you get more points, and that's beneficial to your community. We just had a beach replenishment the last couple of months. They didn't do a lot in Margate, but I think it's every 5 years cycle after they did build the dunes, and that adds to it. So, Margate's always trying to do something to help our rating system. Um, uh, but you know, or if you're in a certain zone, you should know what zone you're in, because Margate isn't just one zone; it's different zones. Um, I have my wife and I have a duplex in Ventnor. It's on Atlantic Avenue. Atlantic Avenue on Obsequion Island is considered the spine. I have 36 inches below grade basement there, which was bone dry from Sandy. And Sandy is that's our threshold. That's our what we look at to judge future flooding. And I'm not required to have flood insurance, and I'm a block from the beach there. But my home that I live in, I'm 2 blocks from the bay, 6 blocks back from the beach. Uh, I'm required to have flood insurance, but I didn't have a claim. I didn't have flooding in my crawl space. So everybody's a little different, but it's something that you should consult with your insurance agent on a regular basis to see if you're getting the best rate.
Dan, I'll let you hop in, but just real quick, Margate is a class 5, so you get 25% off. So every level you are from 10 going up to 1, you get 5% off. So a 10 is 0, 9 is 5, 8 is 10, et cetera, et cetera. Margate to 5, so you have 25% off. That's a nice chunk of change, Chuck.
Well, we're trying. We're trying to help the residents and insurance policyholders,
Sure.
the best we can.
Yeah, 25% is great. And I mean, you mentioned the zone, and I think it's something that, I mean, a lot of coastal residents and absolutely summer residents, but maybe even some locals, don't know their zone. I know in Florida with all the hurricane hits, everyone knows, what zone they're in, what evacuation zone they're in. And I know we don't really have evacuation zones at the Jersey Shore, but knowing your zone absolutely does help, and that's something a homeowner can educate themselves in to help their reaction, to help their response, to help them know what's coming in the event of tidal flooding. And Joe, I just wanted to touch on one other thing that you
Yeah.
mentioned. And the National Weather Service is changing their advisory system, and that also includes coastal flooding as well. So, at the Jersey Shore, we all know coastal flood advisories mean, all right, minor nuisance flooding, stuff that doesn't impact you too much, but can lead to some roads being flooded. That's going away. They're still going to warn you. They're still going to issue headlines and alerts. But now it's just coastal flood watches and warnings. So you're not going to see those advisories going forward, which may be something that residents should know and have to get used to eventually.
Yeah. And you know what? Just to be clear, Dan, right? It's not happening. It didn't happen yet, but it's
Correct.
going to happen in the
Right.
future. So, the warnings or the watches saying, hey, this might happen. And if it happens, it's going to be significant. And the warning is it's happening very soon or happening now. Warning is 99% of the time is moderate flood stage or major flood stage. And that's when it really becomes, a real pain to deal with.
And it makes sense because the advisory happens a lot because coastal flooding, maybe not this winter, happens a lot as well. And you get advisory fatigue, which I know we talked about earlier, and alert fatigue, knowing when to, spread the information, spread the word. So less advisories, more watches and warnings. People are more attuned. Okay, I'm not gonna drain out all these advisories. Oh, wait, there's a warning. These don't happen that often. I'm required to take more action here. I'm going to pay closer attention to it. So I think it's a good change the Weather Service is making, and it's a change we'll eventually have to get used to when it's implemented up and down the shore.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let me add something too. One of the, I guess it's not an issue, but one of the problems that we see with flooding, say in Margate in this summer, and I think people that aren't familiar with the terminology nuisance flooding, minor, moderate flooding, it's easy. You guys can forecast with the tides and the floodings or without a storm. I've talked to Joe when he sees like, hey, you guys are going to have some elevated flooding. Let me know what it looks like. But then we have in the summer, you get these torrential downpours, and you have high tides where the outfall pipes, the storm runoffs, are already filled because the tide's high and it's already in there. So then you get these big bursts of thunderstorms and torrential downpours, and then you drive around and there's people that can't get out of their homes because they have 2 feet 3 feet of water in front, and they're like, how did this occur? And they just don't know. They don't have this experience and understand that this has nothing to do with the tide itself, except for clogging up the drains, this water. But it's more with that's fresh rainwater that just occurred in a downpour, as opposed to you're gonna have a cloudy day and you have water in your streets, and they're like, they don't understand what the difference is.
Yeah, and we have 60 seconds left, so I'll just kind of tack on to that, which is, rain is not an ingredient for coastal flooding. It can exaggerate the coastal flooding, and Chuck's bringing up a great point there. But look, I mean, some of the still like besides Sandy, right? But like some of the worst flooding I've ever seen has been when I was a kid going to the shore in Seaside Park in Ocean County, and those thunderstorms, those big thunderstorms, like Chuck's saying, and there's water up to your knees. When you're walking around in some of the streets, and that's more than you see from most coastal flooding events. But there is a difference, right? I mean, the coastal flooding is strictly from moon phase, winds. Is there a storm nearby? And then the regular flooding is the rain. But flooding is flooding is flooding. It's still going to cause issues. Anyway, Chuck, like Dan said in the beginning, we were going to spend half hour in like that, and we made it happen. So we have like 15 seconds left, 30 seconds left. Chuck, any parting words for you?
No, I just listen. I just want to thank the two of you and Palmer for providing this source for people, and hopefully we can get more people to find the link and get this information, because it's valuable information. And really grateful for you guys that you put this out there.
Yeah, our pleasure. For Dan Skeldon, Chuck LaBarre from Margate. Thank you, Chuck, for being our first guest. NJCoastalCoalition.com is our website. We will be back with you next Tuesday with a new episode of Tidal Flooding Talk. I think the gang will all be here. So Palm and Dan and we'll have a guest as well. We'll talk to you soon, everybody. Have a great week.
Right.